The sky was wrong that afternoon. It wasn't just dark. It was the kind of darkness that seemed to breathe, to roll and twist like something alive. Clouds stacked over Dry Creek in bruised layers, greenish and heavy, and the wind had turned from a whisper to a growl. Mary Whitlock stood on the porch, one hand shading her eyes, the other clutching the edge of her apron that whipped around her legs. The horizon had vanished beneath the storm, swallowed whole. She could feel the air change, thick, heavy, charged. The smell of rain and earth and something metallic filled her lungs. Inside the house, the clock ticked loudly, too calm for what was coming. Her little boy, Sam, napped upstairs, his small snores faint through the open window. She hesitated only a second longer before shouting up the stairs, "Sam! Wake up, honey. We're going to the cellar." No answer. The wind roared suddenly, shaking the door on its hinges. A sharp crack of thunder rolled through the valley. Mary's heart kicked hard in her chest. She turned to go inside when something caught her eye. Movement out on the north road. A lone rider. She squinted through the haze of dust and whipping branches. A man on horseback was fighting the wind, leaning low in the saddle, the reins taut in his hands. His horse stumbled, frightened, and Mary could tell he was losing the fight. The gusts were so strong now that the trees bent nearly in half. "What in heaven's name?" she muttered, gripping the post for balance. The rider was close enough now that she could see his face smeared with dirt and sweat. He was shouting something, but the wind tore the words away. The horse bucked again and went down hard. The man flew forward, tumbling into the ditch beside the road. Mary didn't think twice. She ran down the steps, her boots sliding in the mud. The wind slammed into her like a wall, stealing her breath. Dust stung her eyes and her hair lashed across her face. She pressed forward, one hand raised to shield her eyes as she called out, "Sir, you all right?" The man groaned, trying to push himself up. He couldn't. His leg was twisted at an awful angle, and there was a cut on his forehead, bleeding freely down into one eye. His hat was gone, his clothes soaked with sweat and dirt. "Can you move?" Mary shouted, dropping to her knees beside him. He coughed, blinking hard. "Not much. Legs busted, I reckon." She looked toward the house. The sky above it had started to churn in a sick, spiraling pattern. The air itself seemed to vibrate, that terrible sound like a train in the distance. A tornado. "Oh, God," she breathed. "We've got to go. Now." She slipped her arm under his shoulders, heaving with all her might. He was heavier than he looked, strong but limp with pain. "Come on, lean on me." He managed to get one arm around her, grimacing as he tried to stand. "Don't save your breath," she snapped. "Cellar's this way." Each step felt impossible. The wind was wild now, flinging grit into their faces. The sound of it was deafening, the air filled with flying straw, bits of wood and leaves that felt like knives against the skin. Halfway to the cellar door, the man stumbled. She nearly went down with him, but tightened her grip. "Keep going," she yelled. "You stop, we die out here!" He gave a weak, determined grunt, and together they staggered forward. The ground trembled beneath them. Behind the barn, a roar rose up, low, deep, and terrible, the sound of the tornado touching down. Mary reached the slope that led to the storm cellar and yanked the wooden door open so hard the hinge nearly gave. She half shoved, half pulled the man inside, and threw herself in after him just as the world above screamed. The doors slammed shut behind her with a hollow bang. For a heartbeat, everything was pitch black. Then, by instinct, she fumbled for the lantern she kept by the steps and struck a match. The flame flickered weakly, lighting the small, dirt-walled space. The man slumped against the wall, his breath ragged. The cut on his forehead still bled, mixing with the dirt on his face. She dropped beside him, tearing a strip from her apron and pressing it to the wound. "Hold that there," she ordered, her voice shaking despite her effort to sound firm. He obeyed silently. The ground vibrated. Dust drifted down from the beams overhead. Then the storm hit full force, apart. Branches, boards, and bits of her roof were scattered like cards across the mud, but the house was still standing. "Mercy," she murmured. "We're alive." Behind her, she heard him drag himself up the stairs, leaning hard on the frame. His clothes were torn, his hair matted with mud, but his eyes were steady. The morning after the storm broke was eerily quiet. A fine mist hung over the fields, the scent of wet earth and splintered wood heavy in the air. Mary Whitlock moved through the wreckage of her farm with careful determination, her hands raw from hauling debris and hauling water for the animals. Sam ran ahead, chasing after a dog that had survived the chaos, his laughter a fragile thread of normalcy in the ruined landscape. Cole Matthews stayed nearby, leaning on his crutch, his injured leg still bandaged, but showing the stubborn strength of a man who refused to be idle. Despite the limp, he helped where he could, stacking broken fence posts, lifting beams that Mary hadn't dared touch, and guiding her through the safest paths to check the cattle. There was something quietly commanding about the way he moved, the way people in town would glance after him as he passed, tipping their hats in silent respect. He spoke little about himself, and Mary hadn't pressed. It wasn't her way to ask about strangers unless necessity demanded it. By mid-afternoon, the sun broke through the low-hanging clouds, casting the farm in a golden glow that made the destruction seem almost sacred in its quiet aftermath. The barn was a skeletal frame now, pieces of roof scattered across the pasture, and the fences were little more than jagged lines of splintered wood. Mary wiped the sweat from her brow and paused, looking out over the land. She felt a deep ache, not just for what was lost, but for the years she'd spent trying to hold on to a life that now seemed more fragile than ever. Cole came up behind her, hands resting on the handles of his crutch. "It's bad," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "But it ain't gone. You can fix it." Mary shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "You don't understand. I've been fixing things my whole life. Houses, fences, dreams. I've learned the hard way that some things just don't stay fixed." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Maybe, but you got grit, Mary. I can see it. That's what matters when the world tries to tear you down." She laughed, a dry sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Grit don't keep a roof over your head, Cole Matthews. It don't pay the bills, and it don't feed a boy when the pantry's empty." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn and creased. He handed it to her, and she frowned, taking it with tentative fingers. When she unfolded it, her eyes widened. It was a deed. Her name was scrawled there among others, but the seal and signature at the bottom made her heart stop. Cole Matthews, owner of Matthews Cattle and Holdings. Her mind raced. The quiet, rugged man who had stumbled through the storm and leaned on her for survival was no ordinary cowboy. He owned half the county. "You own this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Cole nodded, his expression calm but serious. "I do, and I came back because I needed to. Not just to check on you, but to make sure you and your boy have what you need to get back on your feet." Mary blinked rapidly, trying to steady herself. I can't take charity. This isn't charity," he said firmly. "It's gratitude. You saved my life in that storm, and I can't just walk away. I want to help you rebuild. All of it. Barn, fences, your home, whatever it takes." She swallowed hard, looking away toward the mist-shrouded fields. For years, she'd fought alone, fending off hunger, debt, and loss. She was proud of her independence, but the weight of surviving alone had been a constant, gnawing presence. To accept help, especially from a man whose wealth dwarfed anything she could imagine, felt like surrender. Yet there was something in his eyes, steady and sincere, that made her reconsider. "You really mean that?" she asked quietly. "I do," he replied. No strings attached. "Just let me help." Sam, who had wandered closer with the dog, tugged at her skirt. "Mama, he's nice," the boy said. "He helped me feed the chickens. He's not scary at all." Mary's lips curved in a small, reluctant smile. "I know, Sam." She looked back at Cole. "Why are you really doing this? Why go out of your way for a stranger? He shrugged, though there was weight behind the gesture. Because you didn't see a rich man or a stranger in trouble. You saw a man who needed saving. You didn't hesitate. That's rare, Mary. She turned back to the fields, the morning sun breaking through the mist, painting everything in gold. The wreckage still loomed large, but it no longer seemed insurmountable. The air smelled of earth and rain, a scent that whispered of renewal. All right, she said finally, voice firmer. We'll do it. We'll rebuild. Huth.